Well, good morning, Grace Church. So a few months ago, my wife and I and Gemma, our daughter, got to move into our brand new house. We're super excited about that. I've been sharing with you. Yeah. I don't know who was happier when we left, the Foleys or us, but I digress. It was a great experience living with them. We're excited to be in our house now. And this is the first house Lisa and I have ever owned, and so we have experienced this new freedom that comes with owning a home of being able to customize and make it your own and change things out. And so that has led to the planning of lots of different home projects that we have currently like have dreams to start or have started. You can call us the next Chip and Joanna Gaines, right? Like HGTV, we got your next show right here, okay? It's us. So our first home project that we really dove into, we said we want to change the light fixture above the dining room, right? So I called my dad over, and we start taking the fixture down, and we just want to dive right in, right? So we're just taking it down. We unwire it, unhook it, get it down. And then we realized we've made a mistake. We forgot to take note of which wire went to what. Like what went where, and what did this do, and all that. So we huddle up and we go, okay, what's the plan? And we come to the conclusion that the best plan, what we're going to do, is we're just going to try a bunch of different combinations until we get power to the light fixture. So we go, all right, this looks right. So we try one combination, and we put the light fixture on, and we try it, and no power. And then we take it down and we try another wiring combination, we try it again, and no power. And then we try one more time, we try to take it down, try another wiring combination, and I bet you can guess it, no power. It did start smoking at one point. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. We thought that was progress, but that wasn't. No, just kidding. So finally, after lots of trial and error, emphasis on error, we found the right wiring combination, and we got power to the light fixture. Yeah. Woo! Man, I think Chip and Joanna Gaines are safe, though. I think their jobs are okay. We're not coming for you. But I learned something important that day. I learned something really important. That to get power from the power source to the fixture, to whatever it is, you have to have the right connection. You have to have the right combination. You have to have the correct wiring to get power from one thing to another. And I'd argue this is not just true for light fixtures and other home projects. It's true for you and for me and for the sake of our souls as well. We need the right connection to get power from the power source. And here's what I know. Life can be draining. Can I get a yes on that? In fact, it can be life that drains the life out of you. I was thinking about that this week. And life can be draining. And when we're not connected to the power source, I don't know about you, sometimes my life, my low-powered life, if you will, it looks like something you don't see for 30 minutes on a Sunday. It looks like something far worse, something that misses the mark quite often, something that I'm not always proud of. This happened to me a couple weeks ago, and my family felt the sting of my low-powered life in those moments. So it was a Friday, and I had a busy week at work, Sunday through Thursday, and I'm normally off on Fridays, and so that's normally my Sabbath day. As Pastor George shared with us last week, Sabbath is a time to reorient our lives around Christ. And so I normally have my Sabbath day on Friday, but because of a bunch of unexpected events and different things, I had to do a little bit of work. I had to do some errands. I had to do stuff around the house. I had to fix some things. It was not a Sabbath day. It was a bunch of unexpected things one after another, so I didn't get my Sabbath. And so that night, our sweet 2.5-year-old daughter, Gemma, it was time for bed, and she was not going to bed. One of those nights, I'm fighting she was fighting everything, right? We tried every little trick as parents, didn't work. So an hour into bedtime, trying to get her to go to sleep, my power wasn't just low, it was out. It was zero, okay? And I had a moment where I yelled at my precious daughter, just 2.5 years old. I said, enough. It's time to go to sleep. I am done. It was one of those moments where, as you're even saying the sentences, you know that you're going to regret it immediately. And Gemma looked up from her bed. She was already upset. She was already crying. And she just started sobbing that her daddy had yelled at her. And so I walked out of her room, and I sat on the couch, and I thought, what happened? How did I get here? And then it hit me. I was a low-powered life at that moment. I was anything but plugged into the power source. I was on zero, on empty, and out of juice. And I know that in a room this size and with others watching, I know I'm not alone either. There's been things that have happened this month, this week, heck, even today before 11:30 Eastern time, that you wish you could take back, you wish you could do over, you wish you could have done it a different way. And my guess would be it's because you're running on empty too. You're not connected to the power source. And so, my friends, what I want to say to us today is the invitation for us to get the correct wiring, to get the right combo, to stay connected to the power source. It comes through the one-word invitation that Jesus extends to us that we've been talking about. It is to abide. This invitation to abide that Jesus extends to his followers, it's so that we would remain in him. Abide's a fancy way to say dwell or to linger or remain. And we've been looking at this selection of verses from John 15, verses 1 through 7. And I want to ask us as we read them again today, I want to ask we would do something a little different. Would you mind standing to your feet if you're able to? And we're going to read these words out loud as a sign that we honor God's words. Does that sound good with you? So the words will be on the screen. Let's read this aloud. We're all going to read it together. Ready, set, go. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine. You are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. Turn to your neighbor and say, even more fruitful, and have a seat. Even more fruitful. Even more fruitful. So we've been in this series, and let me recap the past 2 weeks. A couple weeks ago, we looked at verse 5 of what we just read, and we talked about this idea, to abide together. We learned, Pastor West taught us that the you in there is plural. Now, I can't do as good of a southern accent as Pastor West can, but it's all y'all, right? Like, we learned that. We learned that abiding is a team sport, not just a solo sport. And then last week, Pastor George taught us the idea about abiding on purpose. That in abiding, it takes intentionality. That we don't abide on accident, we abide on purpose. And one way to do that is through Sabbath. We talked a lot about Sabbath last week. And so today, that was in verse 4. We're going to back up to verses 1 through 3. We're going to look at the first 3 verses of this section. I'm going to read it for us again so it's fresh in our head. Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. So before we dive into the specifics of this, let's get a couple things straight. Let's play a little who's who here when Jesus is talking. So who's who? Jesus makes it clear that he is the vine, and that we, his followers, in this case his disciples, and today it's us, we are the branches. Meaning that we are connected to the vine, and we need to stay connected to the vine and remain connected to the vine so that we can have life and the nutrients that we need to bear more fruit. That's the goal of this. But Jesus also designates that his Father is the gardener. There's a gardener in this visual, if you will, of Jesus using the vine. And the gardener actually has a task here. The gardener has the task of maintaining the garden, maintaining the vines. Now, I'm going to admit, I'm not much of a gardener. In fact, if you have a plant that you need to kill, please bring it to me and I'd be happy to help. Won't even charge you anything. I'd be happy to do it for free. If you need somebody to watch your plants over the weekend while you're gone and water them, you need to ask somebody else besides me because chances are they're probably going to die. I'm going to be straight with you, right? I'm not much of a gardener, but I've been learning a lot about gardening as I've been preparing for this sermon. And I learned this, That vines aren't something that you can just kind of like set it and forget it and let grow and just leave them forever. Vines, they require a care. They require a gardener that looks after them and cares for them. A New Testament scholar N.T. Wright describes it this way. It says, left to themselves, they, vines, produce a lot of superfluous growth which must be cut away if the vine is truly to be what it's capable of. So this superfluous extra growth, what ends up happening is it ends up growing on the vine and taking away nutrients from the vine that it needs to actually bear fruit. Pastor Sherry at our Fort Myers Shores campus is a much better gardener than I am, 1,000 times better. And she taught me there's actually a term for this, and it's called a sucker. There's a picture of it right here. Yeah, so that growth right there, it's not going to produce fruit, but what it does is it takes nutrients away from the part of the vine that produces fruit. And basically, it's a lose-lose situation, if you will. And so I want to ask you today, what is the overgrowth of your life currently? What's the overgrowth present in your life? Emphasis on over, okay? Because I need a witness on this. As people today, we are overwhelmed, overworked, overtired, overstressed, overanxious. Do I need to keep going or are you with me? I get a yes on that, right? Like, we're over. Which causes us then to over-medicate, overspend. Yeah, oh, do I need to keep going or you want me to stop? Yeah. You're like, oh, yeah. It causes us to just, quite frankly, be over it all. We're over until we're just over it. Ain't that the truth? But I want to take it a step further now. Instead of just looking at what the overgrowth in our life is, and we might be able to identify that, I want to invite us to take it a step deeper. What's the root cause of that overgrowth? What is it? Is it for you, maybe it's an old script that you've had on your life that you've told yourself for years that just isn't true, quite frankly. Maybe it's a new fear that you've picked up. Maybe it's an addiction, an affliction. Maybe it's a compulsive behavior that you've identified that's a tendency in your life. I'll tell you what it is for me. For me, a lot of the time, it's an old script that I need to try to be good enough for God and others to love me. It's this old script that I have in my head that I keep going back to, that keeps running on a treadmill. And in my worst days, in my worst moments, I try to strive and do a bunch of things to earn God's love or earn the love of my family or friends or people around me. And I miss out on just being with God and being with others. And then sometimes even after that, if I don't hit that mark of good enough in my mind, it leads to just bullying and shame. See, friends, for me, that's what the overgrowth looks like. That's what the root cause looks like. But what is it for you? And I want to propose this, that if you can name that, if you can name the overgrowth in your life and you can name the root cause, that is the thing that God might need to prune in you today. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But maybe you're sitting here and you're going, I don't really know what that currently is in my life. I can't name it. I want to invite you to ask God to reveal it. Ask God, what is the thing that you need to prune in me? And he is faithful and he will name that and reveal that to you. But I want to bring us back to the gardener for a second. See, the gardener has a role. It's maintaining the vine. We talked about that. But it says in the verse when Jesus was talking, it says the gardener has two different things that he can do. The gardener can either cut off branches and cast them away, or he can prune. And when I read these verses before, and I'm like, that's like the same thing, right? What's the distinction here? Well, there's a couple of distinctions of what cutting away and casting off versus pruning actually is. And one of those distinctions it makes, if we go back and look at Jesus' words, we can see this, where Jesus makes the distinction that branches that are cut off and cast away are useless. They're not producing any fruit. But branches that are pruned are producing fruit. They just can produce more fruit. That's a distinction that Jesus makes. And to dive a little deeper in this, I think we need to look at the word prune and what that really means. So when you look at the original language in Greek, that word prune is katharos. It's on the screen. You can see it there. And katharos actually means clean, pure, or unstained. And so when Jesus here is saying pruned, another way you can interpret it is saying cleanse or clean. Jesus further emphasizes this, we see after verse 2 and verse 3, when he says this, you are already what? You're already what? Clean, because of the word I have spoken to you. You're already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. See, Jesus is emphasizing here that there's a cleanse that happens. And that, what is that? That word I've spoken to you, so what is that? So many scholars believe that what Jesus is referencing here in John 15 is actually something that happened in John 13, just a couple chapters earlier. Now, as a reminder, this section of John right here is called the Upper Room Discourse. And it's basically a long conversation that Jesus has with his followers in the upper room. And that starts in John 13 when Jesus enters the upper room and washes the disciples' feet. And this is something you've probably heard. If you've been to church at all, you've sort of heard this before, that Jesus washed the disciples' feet. And at first, the disciples kind of objected. This was something that a servant of the home would do. This is not something that the Messiah or their rabbi at minimum would do. They just sort of rejecting that, saying, no, you're not going to do this. And Jesus said, no, yes, I am. And then he tells them this is John 13, 10 through 11, as he's washing their feet. Jesus answered, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is what? Clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him. And that was why he said not everyone was clean. So Jesus uses this same word here, that when it says clean, it's that same word, katharos. He uses that same word to say that Jesus basically saying, you are clean, you are cleansed by what I've done for you. But he makes this distinction again. You notice this? He goes, but not every one of you are clean, a.k.a. Judas. It says that Jesus knew who was going to betray him and what he was going to do. So Jesus makes this distinction here, that some of you are clean and some of you are not clean. Those who are not clean, a.k.a. Judas, were going to betray him. Those who are clean, does it mean that they were perfect? No. He was saying the other disciples there, the other followers present, were clean. Now, keep in mind, they needed pruning, they needed cleansing still, because keep in mind, Peter, just hours later, was going to deny that he even knew Jesus. So they were not perfect. They didn't have it all together, but there's a deeper message here of what Jesus is saying. The difference between cleanse and not cleanse in John 13. The difference between prune and cast off and cut away in John 15 is this: a disintegration, a separation, a rejection of Christ in our present reality. Here's what that means. This is deeper. When Jesus talks about being cut off and cast away, the gardener does that, this is deeper than just talking down to your Starbucks barista or stubbing your toe and saying another four-letter word other than ouch. Okay? This is deeper than that. This is a full-on rejection or separation of Christ. And scholars often say that when looking back at John 15, when Jesus talks about the branches that are cut off and cast away, that he's referencing Judas again here. Just like he did in John 13, where he said, though not all of you are clean. Now, there's something to keep in mind here before we start getting all judgmental about this. We are not the gardener. So I know what we're doing right now. We're thinking about people in our life that may or may not be in one or the other. We are not the gardener. Say that with me. I am not the gardener. That's God. And I'm thankful for that. Because this is the whole get the plank out of your eye stuff that Jesus talks about. What our responsibility is to worry about our own branch and our own vine, right? And staying connected to that. But here's what I don't want us to miss. The invitation that Jesus extends to us, it's not that we would be cut away and cast off. No. What happens as a result of that, or I should say, we make the decision to be cut away and cast off before the gardener even does it. Judas, he made the decision to reject and betray and separate himself from Christ. But yet he was still at the table for the Last Supper. He still got his feet washed. And I think that in those moments, Jesus, one more time, was offering Judas an extension into his grace. I imagine Jesus sitting there talking about these branches and talking about those who aren't cleansed with a tear in his eye because he knew he was talking about his friend across the table. So friends, when we talk about this, when we think about this, we should have tears in our eyes too. Because no gardener wants to burn down or cut away and cast off their vines. They want to heal and cleanse and redeem every single one of those vines. And that's the invitation that Jesus extends to all of us, that we might be cleansed. So if we're going to learn anything today, if we're going to take away anything from this section, it's this, that we can abide with trust. Say that with me. Abide with trust. That's our invitation for you and for me today. And in order to abide with trust, much like we can't abide on accident, it's tough to abide without trusting. It's tough to commit to remaining ourselves and humbling ourselves without submitting ourselves to God. Here's how N.T. Wright puts it. He says, they have had to submit to the pruner's knife, cutting away other goals and ambitions. They have already borne fruit. They must now expect more pruning so that they can bear more fruit. See, when we abide with trust, when we allow God to be our gardener and to prune and cleanse the areas of our soul that need it, we have to submit ourselves to him. We have to submit ourselves to his pruning knife. And for the rest of our time together, I want to talk about sort of three aspects, three elements, if you will, of abiding with trust. And as I talk about these, I want to invite you to maybe take an inventory, personal inventory of yourself, and think about, how am I doing with each of these? How am I doing with trusting these aspects in my own life? And here's the first one. To abide with trust, what does it mean? Well, it means to trust God's time. That we can trust God's time. Have you ever noticed that so much of our world today is concerned with speeding things up and making things faster? I was looking online this week. So, Amazon Prime 2-day shipping. So thankful for Amazon. Talk about a gift from God right there. But Amazon 2-day shipping now is too slow. Now Amazon offers 1-day shipping. Okay, Uber Eats. Thankful for Uber Eats, right? You get a hot meal delivered right to your house within the hour. Well, now the hour is too slow. Now Uber Eats will deliver food with priority delivery in up to 30 minutes. Crazy. And then I was looking, even like our mobile phone networks. 4G LTE, that's fast, but now guess what? That's old news. In comes 5G, which is up to 10 times faster. Our world is so concerned with speeding things up and hurrying things up. But here's what I've been considering. Nothing great in nature happens quickly. Everything great with nature takes time. And friends, I hate to break it to you. You and I are not machines. We are nature. We are not machines that are built to just go, 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 go. No. You and I are nature. We're more like a vine than we are a machine. And this invitation that is extended to us is to trust in God's time. And here's what that means. There's a biblical scholar, his name's Craig Keener, and he talks about how farmers during this time, when they would prune the vines, that it would often mean sacrificing fruit during that season. Like they would yield less fruit and lower quality fruit in that season, but that it would set them up to yield more fruit and better fruit next season. So here's my question for you. Are you sacrificing better fruit for next season by accepting lower quality and bad fruit this season? Because you just can't wait for what God's doing in you. See, abiding with trust, it takes time. And it means that we have to trust God's timing on this, that it's not going to happen quick. Our tendency is to rush God and want God to just prune it, cleanse it, be done, move on, here are the results. Well, no, sometimes those things take time. They take time. So here's what I want to say. For the person in the room, the worker that had an opportunity for a promotion or a job or whatever it might be, and it didn't work out, and you're questioning timing right now, I want to encourage you to look for what God's doing right here, right where you're at, versus where you could be, because maybe his timing is better. For the student in here, for the middle school, high school, college student, for the young adult in here, that had a plan for their life and how it would go, and that plan has been derailed, or that plan's been interrupted, or that plan's put on hold, or whatever it might be, I want to invite you to consider that maybe God's timing might be a little bit better and more sure than your own timing. We can trust his time, because better fruit is coming. But we don't just trust God's time. Here's the second thing. We trust God's plan, too. Let's be honest. This process of abiding with trust, it's going to hurt. It's not going to be comfortable. It's going to hurt. Because there's a part of us where we have to submit ourselves and open ourselves up to see what it is that God needs to heal and cleanse and prune and redeem in us. And it's going to hurt. It's not going to be always a fun and amazing thing. The results are amazing, but the process might be painful. Our recovery friends around here, and Pastor Arlene does a great job reminding me of how the 12 steps, which we highly promote and we highly suggest and we push and push and push, those 12 steps, they're not exactly the most pleasant steps. Like there's some pain involved in it. I mean, just think about it. You know, as part of the 12 steps, it means admitting your life has become unmanageable. It's taking a searching and fearless moral inventory of yourself, looking for all the ways, the character defects that you have. It's making amends with people that you've hurt and maybe coming face to face with some of them. It's continuing to promptly admit when you're wrong. These aren't fun and pleasant things. They hurt. But the result and fruit of sobriety afterward is so worth it. It's worth the pain. God can redeem and work through our pain. He heals in our pain. I've experienced this firsthand myself recently. For the past 6 months, I've been going to counseling and I've been paying for it. So it's hurt me sitting in the meeting and it's hurt my bank account. Oh, let's be real, right? But I can see now, 6 months later, I can start seeing the fruit that's coming from that. It was painful, friends. It's painful, but it's so worth it. And let's not forget this either, that we serve and love and believe in a God who used the greatest act of pain, a tortured death of his son on the cross, to be the very thing that saved humanity. Our God can redeem pain if we trust his plan. For the person in recovery or in counseling, and it just hurts, and you're just ready to quit and be done, don't quit. Stay in it. Stick it out. For the person out there that's been reluctant to go into recovery or reluctant to go into counseling because you know of the pain that it's going to be to go back in order to go forward, take a leap of faith and do it. Trust God's plan and trust his ability to heal. For the parents and families out there that are walking with their children or grandchildren or family members through just painful situations. Just painful. I invite you to remember God's plan and stay faithful to him and stay faithful to what you've been doing and trust him. So we can trust God's time, we can trust God's plan. There's a third thing we can trust too, and it's this. We can trust God's love. What's often missed in the verses about pruning and the gardener is the relationship. N.T. Wright describes that the gardener's never closer to the vine than when he's cutting away with the vine with the knife, carefully examining each part of it, knowing just what needs to be cut so more fruit can be born. And what's present in that is a loving relationship. And to be honest with you, for a long time, I read these verses in a totally different way. And how I understood the gardener has drastically changed. And I would argue that how we understand the gardener today, it radically changes our view and our willingness to allow God to do this pruning work that's so necessary for us to bear more fruit. I got a visual to help with this. For a long time when I was younger, I would read those verses like this, right? Of an angry gardener cutting away haphazardly on everything that needed to be pruned, right? It's like the guys who do your shrubs at your lawn company, right? They're in 1,000-degree heat. They're going to take a little extra off the top. They're going to cut an extra branch or two. They're angry when they're doing it. They're haphazard. It's all frantic. It's all just cut, and be done. And I imagine God is the gardener who was grunting and grimacing and cutting away at all the stuff that he was so frustrated was there in my life. But then I started reading these verses in another way. I started to begin to understand that it's not an angry gardener, it's a loving gardener. It's not a gardener that wants to cut a little extra off the top. It's a gardener that wants to carefully cut away, kind of like this. A gardener that knows exactly what to do. A garden that has surgical precision. Our hearts need a surgeon. Our souls need a friend, right? It's a gardener that can carefully cut and prune the very things so that we would bear more fruit. It's a gardener that prunes and cuts and cleanses with love. You know who the gardener is? You know who God is? God is the father that I wasn't on that night with Gemma. That's who God is. See, on my best nights, when I get it all right, bedtime looks a whole lot different. On my best nights, I'll carry Gemma into her room where she can, she wants to turn off the light herself, so she'll shut it off. She'll give Elisa and I a hug and a kiss, and I'll tuck her into bed. And we'll read a Bible. We'll read a book, and lately she's been wanting to read from her Bible. So we've been reading a Bible story every night. And then I'll tuck her into bed, and I'll kiss her, and I'll say, God made you, and God made you good. And then I'll go stand over by her door. She wants us to stay in there for a few minutes as she falls asleep. And I'll stand by her door, and I'll just look at her, and I'll just pray. And I'll not just pray for her present, but I'll pray for her future too. And I'll pray that I could be the kind of father, and that I'll do my job as a father to do what I can to prune and help cut away at those things, to help her have a faith that's greater than mine, to love people better than I can, to honor everyone better than I can, that she would be able, and I would as a father would be able to do what I can to prune and cut away those things that need cut away. That night, I was the haphazard gardener, right? A few weeks ago. Friends, if on my best night I can be this, just imagine how much God loves you. Friends, will you submit yourself to the hand of a gardener that wants to cleanse and prune and cut away those things, not out of anger or spite, but so that you would bear more fruit? Friends, we can abide with trust. Let's stand for prayer. God, we're thankful that you're a loving gardener. We're thankful that you're not haphazard or angry or trying to take a little off the top or cut an extra branch. God, we're so thankful that you're mindful, that you're careful, that you're precise, that you're loving. And God, those of us here in this room and those watching online, God, I pray for the courage in these moments to submit ourselves to the pruner's knife, to the gardener's knife. God, that we would name for you, we would willingly give up to you the things that need to be pruned and cleansed and healed in our life. And God, for those of us that might not be able to name it, God, that we would have the courage to ask you to reveal it to us. God, that you would give us the discipline to trust your timing, to trust your plan, even when it hurts. And God, that we would trust in your love, that we'd be able to lean back into your arms, and that you are a loving Father. God, it's in your name we pray. Amen. Well, friends, we want to give you a chance now to lean back into the arms of our loving Father, to abide with him in these moments. And we want to invite you to do that. You can make your seat a place of prayer. Our worship team is going to lead us. We also have our altar open down here. If you'd like to make your way to the altar, you can lift a hand and someone will be happy to pray with you. And let's sing together about leaning back into God's loving arms.